each of you, if you could offer just one piece of information to somebody that's going to, undergo the transition process, what would that one piece of information be? And I don't care whoever wants to start, I'm not going to call on you.
I'll throw out a couple comments.
Okay.
I think much of this, it's a word. So much of this looks like a negotiation as you're talking to your parents about this, or parents, it's just a word. It's not union, it's just a word. But as you go into that negotiation, that conversation, think about, am I really in a position of strength, or am I in a position of weakness? I'll see younger generation or older generation approach the opposite generation, and their approach is just, it didn't have a chance. It didn't have a chance because they really didn't think through simply that. And if we think through how we approach other people, we have a better chance of finding success and finding the solutions that we're looking for. Because I think the key word is collaboration. How do we collaboratively move things in a proper direction, and try to minimize conflict and everything else that could arise? So if somebody else owns all the land and you're going to give them an ultimatum, if you don't have this figured out by January 1, I'm going to leave. And I just had that happen. I said, well, pack your bags. If you're going to give them that ultimatum from a position of weakness, no, just go. Now, if you want to give us some time so we can begin to have that conversation, work through it, we have a chance. So it's really in the approach so much of the time. So that's a piece of advice.
Thank you.
Back on Alan, because I'm basically going to say the same thing, but being that person in the spot of weakness, right? Someone else owns all the land. I'll just use a different word. You can't be entitled. Don't act entitled. Don't feel entitled. Be collaborative, right? Be cooperative. I mean, you do have a right, right? You have a right to know what's going on and things like that. But you can't come into that room. I can't come into that room and sit down in front of my dad and be entitled, because all that does is it degrades the discussions, right? It degrades trust, and thankfully we haven't had to deal with that in our family. So it's made these discussions relatively pain-free.
Good.
He's right on. And furthermore, I think the way I look at it, I mean, 12 years ago, I was 45 years old, and we were in the midst of busyness. I mean, we were raising kids yet in high school. My career was busy, but I had already established a timeline of when I wanted to be done. And I think that's the first thing. And most importantly, though, you have to share that goal with everybody that's involved. So everybody knows that goal, not just your spouse, but your partners, your business partners, your family. All of them need to know what that goal is. And that's how you work towards, then you can work towards the goal. If everybody knows what the goal is, then everybody can collaboratively work together to make that goal happen.
Great comment, Brian. Transparency of information, guys, is critical. It gets that communication. Sorry to throw that in, but transparency is a great word too.
I agree. A couple of thoughts that I had. Certainly, as I said, when we have our meetings, the wives and husbands are always involved. As you said, kind of like the Bible says, you leave your father and mother and you go to your spouse, and you don't know what that other one is thinking at all times. So you just got to respect it. When they need time off, I'm lucky all of my kids are good hard workers, but they need an afternoon off for their family. It's important to them. You've got to respect that. And I think that's one of the key things. I always say, after all, they are the parents of my grandchildren, and I love my grandchildren. So you got to treat them accordingly. I think you and your wife, or you and your husband, got to decide what's important to you in life. We have a kind of a simple goal right now is I have 3 things that I mark richness with. My wife doesn't have to worry how to pay the bills. That's number 1. Number 2, if one of my kids needs some financial help and I have the ability to do that, that's number 2. Number 3, if you were to say, hey, we're doing a cruise and you want to go with, and I can say yes, then I'm wealthy. It isn't about a number of dollars. It isn't about how many acres you own. For me, if I can do those three things, I have all I need. So I don't need to build up more. Actually, at age 45 was when our first son come back. My wife and I made a decision, when a piece of land comes available for us to either rent or to buy, that opportunity to go to our kids first. And if it was the right price and everything, and they didn't want it, then my wife and I would take it. But ever since 45, basically everything is opportunity has went to them. We took on extra land when we were younger, knowing that we had a son wanting to come back, so that when he came back, we give him those leases. So he instantly had leases. But I think parents got to decide that. If a parent buys every piece of ground that comes their way and the kids never get that opportunity, pretty soon they feel like, I'm an employee, I'm not part of this. So I think that's real important. And the last thing, I was just with Kim a little bit this morning, if you want less stress in your life, which I think as we get older, we all do, you've got to give up the day-to-day management. You can't have it both ways. You've got to give up some of them things to have less stress in your life, to have time to enjoy your grandkids. And that's kind of what I take away from it.
Great, thank you. We do have a question from our viewers. How do you plan the transition with protecting those in the organization? So how do you protect the assets if things with that spouse go south?
Well, because we have individual farms and we all farm together, most of the time that spouse deserves half. I just feel that way. Something happened, my wife and I, she deserves at least half. I mean, that's just the way life is, and that's the way the law is as well. So you got to respect that. But as you're planning, if they're married to good people, husband or wife, that's the risk you take. No different than any other risk. And again, they're the parents of our grandkids, and that means a lot to me. That probably trumps everything. And so if that would happen, that would be terrible. Probably more so would be an upset if something happened to one of my sons in a car accident or something. You would want that spouse to remarry, had beautiful young people, nice kids. Now you have someone in your operation that is totally different, might not have the same interest. And that would be a bigger fear to me than a divorce.
Yeah, I
Thank you.
appreciate those comments, Bob. I'll throw a couple other comments in there. Through entity structures, operating agreements, general partnership agreements, corporate agreements, they're there to deal with changes of the owners of those entities to minimize the impact. Through marital rights, to Bob's point, there's legal obligations behind marital rights. It is half. How that gets structured for that half coming out varies by agreement. So it's really to minimize the impact. It's not to alleviate it, it's to minimize the impact. But having good structure around your business is your best way to minimize the impact of something like that is an unknown today, that if it happened, that would be my comments.
I would agree with that. It's all about minimizing the damage that could come about. You can't predict what happens in anybody's relationship. We certainly don't worry about that here, but within our legal documents and our organizations, there's somewhat of a protection mechanism. And again, that spouse is entitled to half of that ownership.
Yep.
But it's all about minimizing and being able to afford the damage.
There's an obvious but uncomfortable one you can talk about, and that's right, prenuptial kind of things.
Sure.
Which, that brings up a whole new avenue though of, those are uncomfortable discussions to have in general. We've brushed that concept as a family, and what we thought was more important was that maintaining that mutual trust that all the parties, right, all 8 parties involved in ours have. So rather than, say, all right, we're all going to do prenups or postnups or whatever you want to call it, it's, to Alan's point, you handle the those potential issues with business structure. We have a good buy-sell agreement in place, right? So we know if something were to happen, what that would look like.
Right.
And there's, that's the tack we've taken.
That's good. Good answers. Again, obviously there's no one answer for any of these situations. And I think it goes back again to leadership and communication. And if you have strong leadership as you are going through this process, part of that is bringing up some of these questions and topics that are a little uncomfortable. But you've got to think about it. And whether you think about it in terms of a divorce, or you think about it, as Bob mentioned, with, a death of a child, all those are real things that can happen and we don't have control over. And so I think, again, it's using the leadership and the communication, the things that we have, and the expertise that's out there to help frame some of this to help us through. Let's see, I think we're kind of winding down. Do any of you have any last minute, a comment or a piece of advice or whatever that you'd like to offer our viewers today before we close out?
I guess just a comment, Kim. I think this is very, very helpful. What's being done today with this webinar on Zoom. It's very efficient, and you're hearing from real life people what's going on. That anybody that viewed this should have some key takeaways, and I would certainly recommend that more of this type of thing happens, because there's no single solution for every operation, but to hear from the real people that are living it, it becomes not just very believable, but you can trust it, and actually it gives them a series of resources that they could call upon, because there is an answer to everybody's problem out there, if they know where to begin to find it. So it's just a general comment, but I certainly appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Alan.
I would certainly echo what Alan just said. Most of my ideas didn't come from me. They came from other people. You talk to families that seem to be successful at that. I learned some things today that I didn't know. So it's the will to want to make a transition, I think is very important, and keep talking to people that look like they're doing it the right way. And many times they will tell you what they did wrong as well, which is every bit as important as some of the right things. I hear people say, well, they'll just change the laws and then I'll be out. Well, that's life. Laws will always change. Some of those laws are better for us when it comes to retirement. So that is not an excuse.
Okay. I think that I would just close this out. I want to really thank our 4 panelists today. There's no doubt in my mind, and I'm sure in the minds of the viewers, that our panelists today really just radiate their passion for their family, their business, and for agriculture, and wanting to be able to transition it to the next generation. So we had great panelists, lots of information and knowledge shared with us today, and really do appreciate that. I want to remind all of you viewers that we'll kind of be taking like a noon break or whatever after the close of this session. And then at 1 o'clock is the Next Generation Ag, what it means to be a new producer. And so that will start right at 1 o'clock. You will need to register on the South Dakota Ag Foundation website for that, and any of the afternoon seminars. And that way, then you can tune in, because this connection is only for this one. So as you want to join the others this afternoon, just get your Zoom connection there. Again, thank you for tuning in and being a part of this seminar. I agree with Alan. I think it was just a very, very good informational seminar here on the transitioning to the next generation. So thank you all very much. Have a great day, and good luck in all your transitions.